if you have been listening for a while, it will not surprise you that I am a little bit of a health nut, a little bit of a biohacking fan. And of course, how we optimize our body has a massive effect on how we optimize energy. So I'm really excited to be chatting with the wonderful Sarah Elisabeth Wilkinson today. Sarah Elisabeth is a certified health and nutrition coach and consultant. She's been running her online practice for over 5 years, and she's worked with over 350 female leaders one-on-one. She also runs group programs, masterclasses, and wellbeing trainings and events in corporate businesses here in the UK. Sarah Elisabeth's specialization really lies in supporting female leaders into optimal health and performance. And she does this by bringing in hormone health, creating resilience to stress, and really focusing on burnout prevention, all through nutrition and lifestyle choices. And this is such a great conversation that, whether you are female or not, is going to be hugely relevant as an ambitious introvert. So we're sharing a lot about how, when we think about health and, let's say, food choices, we're often thinking about weight, and that's really not where we're going with this conversation. What we're talking about today is how making certain food choices can have an impact on our energy and our productivity. So we're talking about gut health, we are talking about brain health, we're talking about choosing a diet and lifestyle that gives us optimal energy to make sure that we sleep properly, so we're fully rested, so that we can be our best, so that we can be creative, innovative, so that we've got a clear brain full of ideas, and so that we're fueled with brain energy to basically sit down and get the things done that we want to do to a really high level. So Sarah's sharing a lot in here about the gut-brain connection, optimizing our gut health, how to manage stress, and how we can use things like minerals to be able to do that. We also talk a lot about tracking and self-awareness in our health journey, and not outsourcing your authority, just to fitness trackers and things like that, but how they can be a wonderful tool alongside tuning in and checking in with yourself. So I absolutely adored recording with Sarah. I've been on her podcast previously, which I'll also link in the show notes. And I just know that any of these small changes that she suggests implemented can make a massive difference, because this is literally how I prioritize my energy on a daily basis. So I really hope you enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed recording this. Sarah, it's so lovely to see you. I absolutely adored being a guest on your podcast, which was, oh my gosh, I think about 6 months ago now. So I'm really pleased to welcome you here to The Ambitious Introvert.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you asking me to come on here. And as I was saying just before we hit record, your episode on my podcast I just got so many great messages about it. So it was so great to have that conversation with you. And I'm excited to delve into all things health today.
Amazing. I will pop a link to that episode in the show notes for here. So if anyone wants to come over and check your podcast out and listen to that, where obviously we chatted all about energy, which is super important. And we're also going to be chatting about energy today, but in a slightly different way. I'm super excited because we're recording this mid-afternoon, and I was thinking about this while I was eating lunch. Because I am really, with my food, I'm always thinking about how am I going to feel after it? What's it going to do to me? And I think for a lot of us, it can be like grab and go, or we eat the thing we've been told, is healthy. But what I really want to dive into today with you is this connection between nutrition and gut health and brain health, and how we can optimize our energy basically from what we're putting into our body.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And this is my area of expertise. So I'm excited to delve in. And I think what you said is so great as well. And that's a real good starting point, is thinking about every decision that you make with food is an opportunity to kind of co-create with your body how it is that you want to feel. So every decision is an opportunity to say, do I want to feel nourished? Do I want to feel energized? I'm making a decision based on how you want to feel and not necessarily how you do feel, which is the battle sometimes, isn't it?
I mean, I know that I've been there when I'm tired and I want carbs.
Yeah.
Because I'm tired or I'm stressed, cortisol's up, I want carbs. But of course, carbs isn't the thing that's going to help me to feel less tired, or, you know, it will help me lower the cortisol, but it won't help me feel less tired. It's just going to put me into a carb slump and I'm going to feel even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the great battle, is figuring out like, what do I want? What do I think that I want? And can I create that space? So I'm not even sure if you know, Emma, because we haven't really spoken about my journey, but I actually started this work that I do from my own relationship with food, and I really struggled with binge eating. So one of the big things that I had to work on when I first started my health journey is creating that space between what I think I wanted to do and what I went and did about it. And there's this amazing quote that I am going to absolutely butcher now, but I think it's by Viktor Frankl, and it's, between stimulus and response, there is space. And in that space, there is your freedom. And that really hit me. And I've taken it with me all the way through my health journey, even to today, where sometimes it's like the stimulus wants you to do something really destructive and unhelpful, especially when you're tired, when you're, you know, running multiple projects, you're working with lots of people, whatever it is. And you've got to make that decision that actually there's a little bit of space here that I need to kind of zoom out and take, and then I can make a decision that's perhaps going to be more beneficial for me. So just a little quote that really helped me there.
Oh, I love that. And it's this idea of, I think, being planning ahead, which, you know, never sounds very sexy and a lot of us don't like, versus responding in how we feel. So if I'm going to finish at 6 p.m. today, by the time I've recorded podcast episodes all afternoon, if I had no food in the fridge, if I hadn't thought about what I'm going to eat for dinner, what am I going to do? I'm going to grab a takeaway or do something, because I've been busy, you know, I've been working all afternoon, I've been having all these great conversations, you know, one of them about food, I'm probably going to be hungry. And am I going to want to go grocery shopping, buy everything from scratch, prepare it, cook something? Probably not. But I knew this was happening. So I have salmon and potatoes ready to cook very quickly in the fridge.
Amazing. Yeah, I absolutely love that. And that's, again, another little tidbit that everyone can take from today is just pre-planning can save you so much hassle in the long run. And I'm a nutritionist, but I still don't love meal prepping. But what I will do is I will kind of make options for myself for later on down the line, or I'll double cook things, or I'll put something in the slow cooker. So being able to see in advance, in the same way that you do in your business or in your work, where you will kind of foreplan what you might need to get done for a certain project or whatever else, seeing your food in the same way is so beneficial and so massive for your productivity. So I love that as well, just like pre-planning. Okay, so my resiliency towards the end of today, and I think this is where so many people struggle, is they expect themselves to have quote unquote willpower way too much. No one has willpower. They're just probably a little bit more pre-prepped for when they've got no willpower left. So it's, instead of expecting yourself to be perfect, prepare for the imperfection. And that really helps. So yeah, I love that.
I love a slow cooker. I'm very glad you mentioned the slow cooker. I adore, my favorite slow cooker, like easy meal, is chicken breast.
Yeah.
And then there's a brand here in the UK, and I can't think what it's called. I think it's called Holy Cow. And they are a vegan curry brand, because I'm dairy free.
Right.
So it's a vegan curry sauce brand. Obviously, I'm putting chicken in because I'm a carnivore. And I just pour one of their sachets, and it's all, you know, it's all good stuff. It's all good ingredients. And maybe some coconut cream or some tomato paste, depending on what flavor. And I put it in the slow cooker. And that's my dinner when I've finished. It's ready.
That sounds absolutely delicious. And it's so easy and it's so nutritious as well. Chucking something in the slow cooker in the morning. And this is another thing about enhancing your kind of productivity and understanding how you can kind of navigate things so that you're most energized, is thinking about when you have the least amount of energy and how can you manipulate your day, in the same way that if you, for example, wake up early morning and that's when you've got the most energy, which is the way that I work. First thing in the morning, I've got all the motivation, all the resilience, all the willpower. How can I set myself up for 6, 7 p.m. where I'm lagging a little bit and I can't really be bothered anymore? And, you know, I'm starting to feel a little bit, unless I'm still on calls and I'm still getting that energy, I'm kind of in a bit like, oh, I'm in rest mode now and I don't really want to. So how can you set yourself up for future you when you don't necessarily want to? And the slow cooker is such a good way of doing that. It's like having a little personal chef downstairs. I love it.
And it smells great. The house smells great as it starts to cook. This is amazing. I can smell it wafting upstairs to the office.
And talking about gut health as well, it's so good to smell your food before you eat it. So
really?
So do you know when you walk past a bakery and you start to saliva because the smell is like, oh my gosh, fresh sourdough bread. That smells absolutely delicious. And whether you like it or not, you're starting to saliva a little bit. That smell is actually your first phase of digestion. That's the first step of digestion, because what it's doing is it's signaling to your body it's time to eat. And within that saliva, you've got digestive enzymes that help to break down that food and help you to absorb the nutrients from it. So if you can smell your dinner, especially just before you eat it, but throughout the day, you're kind of prepping and priming the body to be like, you're just about to digest this. And it really supports you breaking it down and absorbing the nutrients from it. So little biohack there for digestion.
Look at that. I've been doing it without even realizing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper into gut health, because it's something that I feel like even a decade ago, no one was talking about. And then it's become a little bit of a buzzword, and, prebiotics, probiotics, all of the things. What is the significance? Is it just a clever marketing ploy, or does our gut health actually have a massive impact on our health?
Yeah, really, really great question. So it does, gut health is really important. So one of the forefathers of medicine, Hippocrates, I don't know if you've ever heard this saying, but he said all disease begins in the gut. And I'm a firm believer that is the case. However, I do think, and you'll be seeing this more recently with things like adrenal health and adrenal cocktails. Everyone's talking about adrenals, and cortisol is a buzzword at the moment. So what we tend to do is find something out, and then we kind of cling on to it, and products are made off the back of it. And of course, the wellbeing industry is just worth billions and billions of pounds. So I think it's also important to look at the nuance. So with gut health, for example, some of the products that I'm seeing at the moment that have gut health splattered all over them, and then you look at the ingredients and you're like, seed oils, fillers, emulsifiers, gums, all of this stuff, and you're like, that is not a gut health focused food. So yes, it's really important. And I think the thing about digestion is your gut is the only way that the external world can come into your internal world, if we really think about it, because what is happening around you can actually go into, that you're actually eating it and ingesting it. So it's a line of defense. It's really important for your immune system. The majority of your immune system actually sits in the gut, but it's also where you are getting all of your energy from and all of your vibrancy from. When you eat something, your body has to go through that process of breaking it down, absorbing the nutrients, and then carrying out, those nutrients to the specific organs that it needs to function and to work optimally. So without your digestion, you literally have nothing. And sometimes one of the things that I tend to talk about a lot with clients actually is the fact that sometimes gut health symptoms aren't actually related to your gut health. So a lot of people think, oh, if I struggle with my gut health, I'm probably going to get bloated, or maybe I might struggle with constipation, or I might have urgency to go, or I might get acid reflux. But actually, gut health issues really start with things like thin hair, issues with skin, nails breaking or feeling brittle, all sorts of brain fog, poor memory, poor cognition, all of these things that we absolutely need, especially as, leaders in our field. And that actually all comes back down to the gut, because it's like, are you absorbing the nutrients that you're eating? Are you breaking them down properly? Are you eating what you need? Because if you're not, then that's obviously not going to transpire into fuel for the system. So yeah, gut health is really, really important, but I think it's needed to be very kind of discerning with what products you're looking at and what you're doing for your gut health, if that makes sense.
It's really interesting. There is on a very different tangent, there is a dermatologist that I watch on YouTube. Yeah. Her name is Dr. Shireen Idris. She's amazing. I'm going to link her in the show notes because you talked about skin, and this is what reminded me. And she hates hyaluronic acid. She's a fully board certified dermatologist, and she talks about hyaluronic acid and how it's actually not that good for you for all these reasons. But what she says is that in any kind of in skincare or, makeup, the biggest marketing expense is educating the public. And once the public are educated that something is good, it's really easy to latch onto it. So she said all of these products now that hyaluronic acid isn't needed in, they're putting it in so they can put with hyaluronic acid, because everyone goes, oh, hyaluronic acid, great. That's going to, make me moisturize. And I feel like it's the similar thing that you're saying. So like gut health becomes a buzzword. And then every yogurt that might be full of fillers and sugar and sweeteners or whatever, because it's put like a milligram of probiotic in it, it's like gut health.
Yeah, 100%. And some of the products that I see that are actual probiotics as well are literally wild. So and if you look into the science behind probiotics, I'm a really big fan of spore-based probiotics. I don't know if you've ever heard of spore-based, but they're adaptogenic. So they're really great because they go into the system and they kind of look around for what's not there, what is there, what do you need more of, and they adapt to your system. Those I just get the most results with my clients, to be honest. But you can get some that are just like over-the-counter probiotics and, scientific studies. And I think it's important to look at science, it's important to look at studies, but it's also important to look at your experience with clients and clinical experience and anecdotal. I think we need that mix of two, because there is a lot of, there's a lot of stuff behind the scientific studies in terms of, is it profitable? There, no one's really studying herbs because there's no money in it, that kind of thing. Yeah. So you got to take things with a pinch of salt and look at your own experience as well. But there are so many studies that show the ingestment of probiotics that just don't even make it into the digestive tract because your stomach is so acidic that it can, it's got to have some real tenacity to be able to get through to where it needs to go effectively. So being really careful on the products, and that's where it's helpful to work with someone or helpful to do some research to find out exactly what's going to work for your system and feel good for you and do what it needs to do. Because I think a lot of people are like, probiotic, check, done my thing, and still struggling with symptoms. And then we get this kind of, they don't do anything, they don't work. And it's like, they do, but you just need a different type. Or maybe it's not probiotics that you need, maybe it's prebiotics, or maybe it's a different kind of gut bacteria that you need to work on versus, the lactobacillus type bacteria that we see all the time in every product. So I think it's important to kind of personalize your gut health protocol specific to what you're struggling with and what you need.
Love that. And something that you said earlier, which, let's touch on that now because we want to talk about the brain. But you said one of the symptoms of poor gut health is this brain fog, sluggishness and memory. And that for me is the thing. When I don't eat clean, that's the first thing to go. It's, if I don't sleep well, if I've been ill, if I don't eat well, if I have too much sugar, which does happen, it's the first thing. I wake up and I just feel slow. My brain is not firing on all cylinders. It happened recently because I'd been, ill for a prolonged period of time. And I was like, I need to really clean up my diet now. And I'm not kidding. The first day I had bulletproof coffee in the morning and I was like, oh, I'm back online. My brain is fueled.
It's amazing, isn't it? Isn't it so wild how quickly the decisions that you make impact how you feel, especially with food? It still baffles me. I don't know why it still baffles me to this day, but it still really baffles me how you can make a series of really maybe destructive choices around food and really instantly feel that thing. And unfortunately, the way that it is the healthier that you are when you do step back into that. Because I don't know if you ever do this yourself, Emma, because I know you're a health nut, where you look at other people who perhaps eat a suboptimal diet and you're kind of like, how are they living? But they're just like living their normal lives.
I look back at what I used to eat and I go, how did I function? Because it wasn't terrible. But when I look at like the amount of dairy, and I'm intolerant to dairy, but dairy in everything, every meal had dairy. And then I think, oh my gosh, I was forever eating chocolate bars. So I was eating sugar, or, I was using, it's terrible, like sweetener, because I'm like, I don't want too much sugar, so I'll use artificial sweetener, or, I'm going to use this crappy oil to cook in because it's got less calories, and like I don't even want to think about what that oil was made up of, and but you don't know what you don't know until you do it. When I first got really onto the health thing, I used to be much better than I am now, I will say. I used to be very strictly paleo. About every 6 weeks, I would go and have a McDonald's to remind myself how bad I felt. That was how I stayed on it. I would go to McDonald's, order, I would eat it. I would be like, at the taste. And I would feel awful for a day afterwards. And I'd go, it's not worth it. And that always motivated me to keep eating and like cooking for myself.
that is motivation in itself. How do you not want to feel?
Yeah.
Get back to it.
Which is exactly it.
True.
And, and that's what we touched on before we hit record. Like, I was eating lunch today and I was like, I've got 3 podcast recordings this afternoon. How I want energy. So I don't want carbs because I know that I feel like going to sleep after I've had carbs at lunchtime.
Yeah.
So I was really thinking, like, what am I going to have? What am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? What's going to, fuel my brain in the best way to talk for 3 hours?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I think this is a really helpful thing that, the listeners could go away and practice with, actually, because I think a lot of people have that disconnection between what they're eating and how they feel. And that was definitely the case for me. And I don't know if you had to go through the process of kind of learning that when you first went on your own health journey. I was so disconnected, and exactly like what you said, I was on every diet. I did the Special K diet, the cabbage soup diet, all of the different diets. They were hideous.
They sound delicious.
There was one that was like the military diet, which is like a can of tuna and then like a potato. Like it's white. It's
like military rations.
Like,
you were like in the trench.
Like, why are we doing this to ourselves? But I had to spend a really long time getting back in tune with my body and relearning what hunger and fullness felt like, because I didn't know. I was so used to like really stuffing food in to the point where I'm like, am I full? I don't know. I just feel sluggish and crap all the time. And then, understanding how I felt following on from the meal. So do I feel less energized after this? Do I feel overfull? Do I feel satisfied? Then there's emotional satisfaction, but also physical satisfaction. So it's like I might be satiated on a physical level, like I might be full, but am I satiated? Do I feel good? And what gives me more energy? What gives me less energy? So I'm a really big fan of doing a little bit of tracking, actually, and not tracking from the perspective that we're used to, like track what you eat and how many calories and macros and all of this stuff, but tracking what you eat and how did it make you feel? Because then you'll start to put the dots together. And I'm exactly the same as you, Emma. If I have a load of carbs at lunch, not a lot is happening in the afternoon. But if I have, so for example, mine today was like grass-fed beef sausages and blueberries with sauerkraut and a bit of salad. So something like that works really, really well for me. And then I'll have my carbs in the evening. And that feels really good for me. And I know that kind of gives me that optimal performance piece. So yeah, listening to your own body and figuring out what works for you. I equally know some clients who I've worked with who, if they don't have carbs, they just don't feel right. So it's finding that magic Goldilocks effect for you specifically.
It's so true. And, one of my favorite lunches in forever since I was a kid is a jacket potato with tuna mayonnaise.
Wholesome.
But, I could go to sleep for 2 hours now after. So I can't do it on a day that I'm working. And that's the other thing. If I didn't have calls in the afternoon, I can absolutely do it because I'm just going to swan around. And I just think people don't realize how much your nutrition and gut health gives you a competitive edge as an ambitious introvert, where our energy is limited. We want to be using it as well as we can. And if it is making just a slight adjustment to a breakfast or a lunch, that means we're going to be so much more productive during that day. That's a massive ROI.
Oh, 100%. This is something that I say all the time, is like your health is your best asset as a leader. Your best asset, because if you don't have it, and think about the decisions that you make when you're clear-minded, when you're creative, when you're productive, when you have that energized mindset, immediately you're making better decisions, you're more productive, you're getting more done, those quick ticks are happening, you're getting that dopamine response from, not from food, but from the tasks that you're actually completing in the day. Because that's another thing, if you're getting those dopamine hits from the snacks and stuff that you're eating throughout the day, it kind of nudges you into that direction versus into the direction of being productive and getting things done. So yeah, really thinking about what's being prevented by me not being in optimal health right now? How, if I optimize my gut health, if I wasn't sat in a meeting thinking about how bloated I feel or how much, how brain foggy I feel, because that was another thing that I really struggled with. And unfortunately, it comes along with a past of restrictive diets and then overeating and all of that kind of stuff. You have to kind of go through that phase of rebalancing and figuring out where that kind of optimal line is for you. But brain function and being able to concentrate, remembering what you were writing that email for, all of that stuff is so, so important. And being in optimal health is a tool that you can use in your life, in your business, in your work to create more productivity. So I just think it's the ultimate biohack, isn't it?
I love it. I love it. So we touched on the probiotics and the spore-based, and that's, you know, a really great way to be optimizing our gut health. Obviously, it's an individualized approach. But when it comes to brain health, what are some of the things that are really good for us to consume, and some of the things that maybe we should avoid if we want to be, you know, firing on all cylinders, let's say?
Yeah. 100%. I love this. So in terms of brain health, again, I mean, what's really interesting is that when you are, and when you're literally an embryo, your brain and your gut are actually connected. And as you grow, you're not going to be able to see this because I'm doing it on video and I use my hands to talk.
I use my hands to talk all the time and then go, no one can see me. It's a waste of time. But, you know.
As you can see, so your brain and your gut are connected. And then as you grow, they kind of separate, but they always are connected via that vagus nerve, which is essentially that. And your gut has its own nervous system, right, called the enteric nervous system that functions all by itself, which is just so amazing. But you have this kind of like dual communication between the two, which is where gut health, again, is really important for brain health, because if you're not giving your gut the nutrients that it needs, that nourishment isn't going to the brain in the first place. But as a rule of thumb for brain health, healthy fats are just so beneficial. So lots of fatty foods and healthy fats like olive oil, salmon, smash fish, so sardines, mackerel, all the like fatty fish are really beneficial. Some good quality oils, walnuts, so nuts, I'm a really big fan of for brain health as well. Blueberries as well, so polyphenol rich foods, which are, you know, really beneficial for the brain. And again, anything that's positive for the gut is going to be positive for the brain. So things like probiotic rich foods. I'm a massive fan of sauerkraut. I grew up in Poland as well, so I grew up on sauerkraut, and it's just like, again, just I'm glad that because a lot of the people that I try and kind of encourage to eat them, they're like, this is disgusting. What is this? I'm like, I grew up on this stuff, so I'm good. But definitely recommend adding in some sauerkraut. And then one of the things that I always say is find that perfect protein to carb ratio for you. So for me, I need a lot of protein, and I'm a really big fan of like animal proteins. In my personal opinion, I just think animal protein is, you know, you can't replace it. Unfortunately, I was vegan for 7 years. I don't know if that was wrapped up in a distorted relationship with food and that kind of thing. But for me, animal protein really works. So carnivore-based diet. And then my carb ratio on top of that needs to be protein to carb needs to be mostly protein and fiber. And that works for me until the end of the day. And then I can kind of up my carb amount. But have a think about what feels really good for you and what ratio you need specifically. So another thing that I always say is it's kind of like a scale. So for example, we would think broccoli is quite a good food, right? So everyone, broccoli is really good for you. But if you eat one stalk, okay, you're okay. If you eat two, you're all right, you're okay. If you eat 3, 4, 5, you're going to start feeling a bit crappy and bloated, aren't you? You're going to start feeling a little bit like this is not sitting very well. So it's about figuring out where that pain to pleasure threshold is for you with each food and figuring out how you feel based on that. But as a general rule for brain health, fatty fish, fatty foods can be really helpful, really optimizing that protein to carb ratio. I'm a really big fan of adaptogenic foods as well. So medicinal mushrooms, so lion's mane is really powerful. And I use that quite a lot in my own working day, just a little tincture that I put into some water and kind of mix in. And you can get that in coffee form as well. That can be really beneficial. Rosemary as a herb is so beneficial for your brain health as well. So you could literally just get fresh rosemary and put it into a teapot. If you've got one of those teapots that kind of holds in the herbs, brew some water in there or boil it up on your stove. And that's so helpful for memory and cognition as well. So these types of things can be really helpful.
I love what you said about finding the ratio that's right for you. I remember seeing a study, and I'm going to butcher this, and I can't give any reference for it whatsoever. So everyone's just going to have to trust me that I saw it. But it was about whether you lose more weight on a high fat, low carb or high carb, low fat diets. So they split these people, and some people were consuming, X percentage of their calories from fat with just a little bit of carb. And the other group were the opposite way. So they were on like a traditional low fat diet and eating more like rice and pasta and things.
Yeah.
And the results it was negligible. There was very little difference between the weight loss, but the difference was that the people with the high carb diet didn't feel as good is what they'd found, because they're not getting the satiation from the fats and So that actually people think, oh, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to, cut out carbs, or I'm going to cut out fat or something. It was the same, but it was more about how they felt.
Yeah, 100%. And for the people who are listening who struggle with anything that kind of relates to insulin resistance, so like PCOS, for example, is something that I see in my clinic all the time, or type 2 diabetes or fatty liver disease is something that I'm seeing a little bit more of recently. And all of these are related to insulin resistance, which means to say that you're not going to be able to process your carbohydrates as well as maybe the next person. So for one person, it might be really, and it depends on your genetics, it depends on how you digest things, it depends. And I think any good practitioner is always going to answer any question with it depends for the most part, which is frustrating when we want to give generalized advice. But I recommend massively trialing a few different things. And I always say to my own clients, like, go away, do what we practice doing what we've kind of mentioned today, and then have one day where you get up, you go to, the local coffee shop and you have a coffee and a croissant and see how you feel. Exactly like what you did.
Like my McDonald's. Yeah, the exactly. McDonald's experiment.
Yeah, exactly. And then you'll get to figure out for yourself what works for you and what doesn't. But you're absolutely right. There's not really much difference by way of weight loss, by way of actual like results in terms of like, physical results, but like the way that you feel or the way that you function, it can look completely different depending on your carb tolerance level, which for the most part, I find that people generally have a lower tolerance to carbs, to be honest. It's just that there are some individuals, especially if they've got a history of like chronic undereating, chronic dieting, that it's like you don't cut out your carbs at that stage. But it's really interesting because there's such good science at the moment around. So another one is front loading your nutrition at the beginning part of your day. Which I am just so grateful for that study, because so many people talk about the benefits of intermittent fasting. And I do, there are certain instances where I think actually, depending on where you're at in your cycle, if you're a female, and depending on, obviously males take to it a lot better, and depending on your resiliency to stress and how you've built up your health so far, could be beneficial. However, actually what studies are saying is that you're satiated more so across the day, you're more productive, you tend to eat less later on in the day. If you start your day front loading that nutrition with a really high protein breakfast, you're signaling to the body that you're safe, that you can function. Productivity tends to be better versus skipping breakfast and then going straight into kind of lunch and dinner.
So that's so interesting you say that, because I used to do a lot of intermittent fasting, and I do it by having bulletproof coffee in the morning, and then I'd eat my brunch at about 11:30. That was the time that I'd be starting to get hungry. And then I'd eat my dinner around 5, because I like to eat quite early anyway. And then I'd fast through again. And that was really great in probably my mid-30s. I felt amazing. Yeah. I'm now in my mid-40s. That does not work. It does not work for me. I tried adding protein into the bulletproof coffee to give myself, that protein boost. Yeah. And it just didn't work. I'm hungry earlier. I don't feel as good as if I still have bulletproof coffee most mornings, but a couple of eggs with it, or some slices of chicken, and having a drink of greens or something, that I feel like, oh, I've got that now. And then I'll have a small lunch and then a dinner. So like none of it's wrong, but obviously my hormones have changed. My lifestyle's changed, because I was gone from doing shift work to working at home. But it's really interesting to see how what used to feel really good doesn't feel good now.
Totally. And isn't it so wild that you find something that works for you, and then maybe a couple of years later, when your hormones change and your lifestyle changes a little bit, you're like, I've got to figure it out all over again.
Like another experiment.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things that and we haven't had a chance to talk about minerals yet, but I love minerals. In fact, I tend to do hair mineral testing with every client that I work with, because I find that minerals are a really important part of the process when it comes to your digestion, brain health, all of the things. But where your minerals are at will tell you what stage of stress that you're in. And sometimes being under stress is sometimes you're under stress and it feels really nice. Like living on adrenaline feels really good. So there are some people who are like, but I feel really good when I do this. And it's up to you to kind of decipher, is it good running on adrenaline good, or is it good, I'm going to run out at some point, or is it good, this is actually really good for me? And so it's figuring that out actually, and figuring out, is it, is this safe stress, or is this stress that could potentially later on lead to burnout? So it's figuring that out as well, that can be quite challenging at times.
So I know so much of this, like you say, is individualized because it can depend on your gender, on your age, on your hormones, on your lifestyle, on your previous, history, on your insulin resistance, on all of this stuff. I know that you do really kind of thorough testing with your clients that you work with. Can you give us an idea, just so if people are curious to like, well, what do they learn about themselves before they dive in? What kind of tests do you do as standard, and what information does that give you to work with?
Yeah, totally. So I include hair mineral testing with all of my clients. And what that does is it basically checks the status of your minerals. The reason that I like it, and the reason that I'm a big fan of minerals in general, and again, going back to what we were talking about with gut health and brain health, getting in, your sodium, your potassium, a really good quality electrolyte. So I don't know if you've heard of Element, but they are just absolutely fantastic. I love them so much. They have a really good chocolate salty flavor.
So I'm laughing because there's a website called health.com.
Yes.
Here in the UK. I don't think it's worldwide. So apologies to anyone listening. And I'm obsessed with health. And I want to buy everything that's on there. And they keep sending me emails about Element. I haven't tried them yet, but they keep coming up.
Yeah, definitely. Get yourself the little, I don't know, because the variety pack, I'm like, get the variety, but in the variety pack, there isn't the chocolate and there isn't the grapefruit, and they're the best ones. So
yeah, you had me at chocolate. I think I'd just go straight out.
They're definitely worth it. Definitely worth it. I would definitely, but the sodium and potassium, really, really beneficial, because when you're under stress, and this is one of the things that I like to talk about with the clients that I work with, because I work with a lot of leaders and people who run their own businesses. And the thing that people don't recognize is, even if you're not under stress in terms of like, I feel stressed, when your workload is high or when you've got a lot on, you're naturally burning through minerals because it is you being under stress. So one of the things that I say is, you don't necessarily need to add all of these stress reducing practices into your day-to-day life. But what you need to do is you need to arm yourself with the nutrition to build up that resilience to stress, so that when you are under stress and you've got a massive workload, if I've got a big workload, my first thought is kind of like what you said with the food. I've got a big day, I've got prep for later. For me, it's like I've got a big week. How am I going to get my minerals in? Because I know that I'm going to be burning through them. So with the mineral testing, it basically just tells you where you're at with each mineral. So it'll be like, are you low in magnesium? Are you low in sodium and potassium? Are you low in zinc, which would be, really helpful indicator of how immunity is. And again, we know that immunity sits in the gut. Low in selenium. So a lot of people, I don't know how much you know about thyroid health. I'm sure you're really clued up with your own kind of health journey that you've been on. But, a lot of the clients that I work with who struggle with that sluggish metabolism, or feel like their metabolism is quite sluggish, they'll go to the doctors, they get their thyroid checked. Thyroid is normal. Everything's fine. You're just, you're making a big fuss about nothing. Go handle your stress and see you later. It's the response that they usually get. Whereas actually, sometimes if your selenium is really low, which is the fuel that powers up your thyroid, you could have hypothyroid symptoms and not necessarily, and still have the thyroid hormone in the system, but is it being utilized correctly? So minerals are very much the spark plugs of your body. It's almost like having a car full of petrol, but the electrics aren't working. Same with sodium and potassium. Potassium in particular helps thyroid hormone kind of travel around the body in an effective way. And so without the potassium, can your thyroid do that effectively? Are you functioning at an optimal level? So replenishing those as a general rule can be really beneficial.
It's a really kind of delicate balance as well with minerals, isn't it? Because you could be taking a low, like magnesium, for instance, and then it could be affected by copper or all of these other things. And it's a very kind of delicate ecosystem.
Yeah, they can contraindicate with each other massively. So it's like check-in is helpful. But for the most part, I rarely see it when someone's got too much magnesium. Oftentimes people are quite low, and especially because minerals, if you think about it, started in the soil. It's from the soil that then kind of sit and live on the vegetables that are growing, and then we kind of eat those and in turn kind of ingest the minerals, and the soil quality just isn't as good as it used to be. And so we're kind of in this state of we're eating all of our vegetables, and maybe that's why we need way more fiber than people, think about hunter-gatherers. They probably weren't kind of hammering down 30 grams of fiber a day, but we perhaps need that much just to keep up with the kind of nutritional deficiencies that there naturally are in day-to-day food that we're eating these days, unfortunately. So
we always laugh. One of my friends, she says that taking magnesium changed her life. But she actually made a ton of other changes and she went to therapy and all kinds of things. So we kind of laughed like, oh yeah, that was nothing. It was just the magnesium.
Definitely the magnesium.
But
yeah.
literally, she said taking like 2 magnesium capsules an hour before bed has changed her life.
Yeah. I would agree with that in terms of the experience that I've got with the clients that I've worked with. Magnesium is one of the supplements, and I've toyed with so many. I'm sure you have as well, because you're as much of a geek as I am. But as soon as I started taking magnesium, I noticed a difference. And I don't always have that with supplements. There are some that I've taken and then I've taken them out and I've not really noticed a difference and I'm not sure. And I like to trial everything just to, especially if I'm going to be recommending it to clients. And with magnesium, it's like immediate difference. And I know if I've been on holiday for 2 weeks and I haven't taken my magnesium with me and I come back, I know about it. I know that I haven't taken my magnesium for 2 weeks. So that's really interesting.
That's the key, isn't it? I was speaking to a friend about this. She had been taking some quite pricey hormone balancing supplement for menopause.
Yeah.
That she didn't know if it was working. She'd been taking it for 6 weeks. I don't know if it's making a difference. She went away for a week without it. She was like, it's making a difference, because it wasn't until she'd taken it out that she realized actually how good she felt. And with the magnesium thing, for me, I take magnesium most nights. I can be a little bit forgetful. And the difference, the nights that I don't take it, I get about, on average, 30 minutes less deep sleep.
That's
because I check it on my Oura ring. So nights without magnesium, around 55 minutes to just over an hour of deep sleep. With magnesium, it's an hour and a half.
That's so interesting. Do you know what? I never even thought to do that little experiment. I'm going to do that. I'm going to give it a go. And
I'm going to remember to take my magnesium tonight.
You're like, I'm just self-reminding, just magnesium.
But it's really great, I think, when you can, and that's like you were saying about trial and error and trying things out and adding it in and taking it out and play around and see how you feel. Because I've got the Oura ring, which is great. But it's very obvious to me, because I wouldn't wake up and go, I don't necessarily wake up and go, oh, my sleep was way better, but the data's there. I'm like, oh, I had a ton more deep sleep. Yeah, this is great.
Totally. It's really interesting, actually, because I held off on buying a tracking device just because I had obviously gone through a lot of, disordered eating and that kind of thing. So I was a bit wary about getting a tracker. But then I only recently got the Oura ring maybe like 4 or 5 months ago. And I'm really shocked at how much I already know about my body, because I thought that it was going to be this revolutionary thing and I was going to look at the app and it was going to tell me so much. But so far, it's not really told me much that I don't know, which I'm really pleased about, because it's like, okay, cool. All of that work that I've done on tuning back in and figuring out, it's good to see the data and it's good to have it tracked as well. So like, for example, with the magnesium, I'm going to go away and do that experiment now, because that's really interesting. But for the most part, learn to read your own body. And it's like you said, it's just confirming what you already knew. Like I knew that my sleep wasn't great last night or whatever, but it's that confirmation. And you're quite an analytical person as well, aren't you? So understanding, whereas I'm a bit like, it was crap, that's it, move on, get on with it.
I'm like, it was crap, where's the data, let me look.
Totally. Let me do numbers. Oh, this doesn't feel but
I think you make a good point there, because there are so many fitness trackers and different devices and things, but it's not to give away your own agency and go, oh, well, this told me it's this, so I have to do it. It's about using it in conjunction. And to me, it's the interesting one where I go, I don't feel so great. And then I check my readiness score and it's a little lower. So it's kind of backing up what I already feel.
Totally. And on that point as well, that's something that I'm noticing. I know we weren't meant to talk about this today, but never mind.
That's fine.
Good. We go off on tangent.
We'll go there.
Yeah, cool. One of the things that I noticed, so obviously, I work with a lot of female leaders. We talk about the different phases of your cycle and how your cortisol levels are higher in your luteal phase, and all of that stuff. But until I got the Oura ring, I didn't realize just how drastic that was for me, to the point where I really have to set boundaries with things like social media and my phone in my luteal phase, because my Oura ring is screaming at me, like, you are so stressed, and I will be doing nothing, like literally just scrolling on things or whatever. And I've really had to learn to set boundaries in certain phases of my cycle so that I can be really intentional with my own energy and really optimize my brain power, because I'm realizing how little brain, capacity I've got when it comes to kind of resiliency to stress and things like that in that phase. So it's confirming what you knew, but to what extent, and that confirmation sometimes can help you act on it. So it's the same with the hair mineral testing. You know, I show clients the results and they're kind of like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. It's almost like, have you ever had your human design or anything read and you're like,
oh yes,
or like a personality test, and you're like,
oh yes,
oh my gosh,
all of them.
Yeah. That's like, oh my gosh, it's so me. It's like, I knew I would like that, but you know, this is so good to read because it feels really validating, and it feels like at least I know like a step-by-step kind of action plan of what to do next. So it's kind of the same thing really, but yeah.
So what are other than the hair mineral, what other tests do you do that really give you kind of a baseline idea of what a client might need?
Yeah. So to be honest with you, I only include the hair mineral testing just because it's really good. It's a really good MOT kind of, it will tell you a bit more about your stress response. It'll tell you about any recurring infection. It'll also tell you a little bit more about your nervous system, which I find it's
interesting.
It's really interesting. And the reason for that is because it's the direct mix of emotional and physical. So the hair mineral testing doesn't lie from an emotional perspective. It will tell you if you are burnt out, overworked, all the things. Whereas with blood testing, it doesn't tend to work that way. And with the hair mineral testing as well, it's a 3 to 6 month period that we're looking at. So whereas when you go get your blood checked, it's like, you know, what were you doing last night, or what were you doing today, or have you been to the gym in the last 3 days? Because if so, it might impact your inflammation markers. Whereas with the hair mineral testing, it's like, overall, how have you been living over the past 3 to 6 months? Let's delve deep into that. And that feels really good. I do the gut testing as well every now and again. But to be honest, for the most part, when a client comes to me with gut issues, it's I know what they need. The gut testing can be quite an investment. So I think it's worth us always putting in the basics and putting them on a kind of protocol that would get rid of any, you know, if it's SIBO, if it's Candida, whatever it is that they're struggling with, you can kind of deal with that before knowing, you know, the ins and outs anyway. But what's really interesting about the gut testing is, have you ever heard of a bacteria called Akkermansia? You probably will.
No.
Oh, okay. So they've actually studied this. So it's a bacteria. I'll send it you in a text so that you can have a look at it, because this is going to satisfy all your geeky urges in the same way that it did me. But essentially, it's a bacteria that is very much linked to insulin resistance. It's linked to things like Alzheimer's and lots of other different kind of conditions. And actually, when I did my gut testing, my Akkermansia levels came back really, really low. Another one it came back with was like obesity and cravings for lots of food, like the insulin resistant types symptoms, like lots of cravings for carbs and sugar and things like that. And I found that really interesting because my Akkermansia levels were really low. And of course, I've got a history of binge eating as well. So I was like, has that got some kind of, is there some kind of link there? And so all of my other kind of, and again, if you're just having a standard probiotic and it's the normal lactobacillus, but it's actually your lactobacillus levels are absolutely fine, but it's your Akkermansia levels that are really low. And that's also then linked with all sorts of other chronic conditions later on down the line. And actually Akkermansia it's built up by like polyphenol rich foods. So like, do you know, like the red, if you know of health, Organifi have got a really good red juice, which is like the pomegranate. It's so good for your gut health because it really it encourages the growth of Akkermansia, along with things like cranberry, like all the really red, vibrant things that we don't actually eat that often. And so that's quite interesting as well in terms of the different bacteria and what they're kind of linked to. But I think ultimately it's a nice to have that one, but it's not necessarily a necessity, need to know what's going on there kind of thing, unless you're really kind of chronically struggling with your gut.
So it doesn't have to be that difficult and complicated. It's not like you've got to go and spend a ton of time and like thousands of pounds or dollars on a load of tests to be able to give you kind of a baseline idea of where you need to focus.
Yeah. One of the things that I always say is that we spend a lot of time in the kind of like 1%. It's almost going back to that idea of like we're stepping over notes to pick up coins, especially when it comes to gut health. Or we could be buying all of these kind of like really basic product, like the yogurts and things like that, because they've got gut health plastered all over them, where actually there are so many simple things that you can do to improve your gut health. So things like, for example, taking a couple of really deep breaths before you eat just works wonders. And there will be people who are doing all of the complex things and have had all of the testing, but actually what they really need to do is calm their nervous system before they sit and eat. Because if they don't, the way that your body works is if you're in fight or flight, your blood is rushing away from your organs and it's rushing to your hands and legs because it thinks you need to run. So if the blood isn't rushing to your organs, it's not, those organs aren't getting the vital nutrients that they need in order to function. Everything shuts down, right? So if you're eating at your desk whilst mid-meeting or mid-doing something and you're not even acknowledging the fact that you've got food there and we're trying to hammer it, of course we're not going to digest that food very well. So that idea of like, first of all, smelling it first because it's in the slow cooker downstairs,
Love
which
that.
is, yeah, little hack there. But then also bringing it, and if you are going to eat at your desk, just kind of slightly move out the way, smell it for a little bit first, look at it, like get yourself ready for it, get yourself primed for it. Some bitter foods can be really helpful. So a bitter tincture or some rocket can be really helpful. Or I have a little, Swedish bitters tincture that kind of, again, because it's bitter, what it does is it helps to stimulate those enzymes, those digestive enzymes, those digestive juices, if you like, that will then help you to break apart that food. And it just signals to the body it's time to eat. And so then when you eat that, it naturally kind of breaks itself down and then you can digest it properly. So little things like that can be really helpful. A couple of deep breaths before you eat, really acknowledging that you've got food there, calming that vagus nerve down before you eat so that blood can start rushing back to the gut where it needs to go. We call it rest and digest for a reason, because you need to rest to be in digest. And so that can make a massive difference. And I've met clients who have been doing all of the things, but then it's that nervous system piece that they're missing. So everything is connected, even though we think that perhaps it isn't, and we see everything very like what's good for gut health and what's good for hormones and what's good for cortisol. Usually they're all connected and they're intertwining and bothering each other, which is good, but also means we've only got one job to do versus a million, when we've got these chronic issues that are coming up.
I think it's the way we've been conditioned as well of like, oh, here's the fix and you can buy it. So you might buy a supplement or something that, is covering the thing that you're trying to do. But then if you're still eating like a terrible diet full of sugar, that's going to have an impact on your gut anyway. So you kind of cancelling it out by your other lifestyle choices.
Yeah, 100%. And you can be spending so long doing all of the biohacky things, which I'm a big fan of, really. But some of the people that I work with or speak to who are doing all of the biohacky things, it's like they're doing all of that, but then they're not leaving the house, or they're not going out into nature on a weekend, or they're not, having a practice where they're just away from their screens for, a couple of hours in a day. And it's like, think about what's going to be the biggest needle movers. What are going to be the biggest needle movers for you, and focus solely on those, kind of like you do in business, right? You're not focusing on the marketing and the branding side of things and all of that, the shiny nice to haves. You got to focus on the needle moving things, like what's going to get me in front of my ideal clients? What's going to, how can I strengthen that communication? What about my delivery? Like all of that stuff. And you focus 90% of your energy on that. Same with health. It's like, what's going to be the biggest needle mover for me? And how can I really concentrate all of my efforts onto those things? And the nice to haves can be nice little dotted I's and crossing T's and that kind of thing.
Oh, I feel like we could talk all day because there's a million directions you can go. But sadly, I have to wrap it up. Thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom. And I know this is going to give many of my listeners something to think about, because if we can, like you say, move the needle or get 1% better just by implementing a quick and easy change in how or what we eat, then that's a massive ROI when we're, really looking to channel our energy. 100%. And I think if you take anything from this episode, it's like, go away and do a little bit of soul searching with your food. Like, how do you feel after you eat? How do you feel when you eat something different? And just really get to know yourself on that deep level. And I think that's a really powerful, isn't it so powerful to look at your Aura score and be like, oh, I kind of knew that based on how I feel. We kind of take that for granted, don't we, when we're at this phase of our kind of health journey? But actually that takes building up that relationship, just like a relationship with your friend or your partner. You've got to build up that relationship with your body as well. Oh, it's so true. And obviously, before I let you go, I'm going to ask you, and I know you could probably give me dozens of answers to this, but I know you're an extrovert, but you are a sensitive extrovert.
Yeah.
And you are very, conscious of your energy. So how do you make sure that you can own your energy on a daily basis? If you had to put it down to one practice or tip or hack, what would it be, the thing you can't live without?
I love this question, and there's so many answers we could go into, but I think for me it's being really picky, just being a really picky person. I'm really picky with who I spend my time with. I'm really picky with what I allow in my space, in my energy, because I know, we were saying this before we hit record, that I'm like a sponge and I will soak up the environment and everything else. So being really picky about what's in my space, what I'm eating, and not necessarily from that restrictive point of view, but it's like, if I want to feel this way, I need to be picky about what I'm putting in my body, what's around me. So being a picky person, I think, is a flex.
I love it. Own your energy by being picky. Permission to be high maintenance to everyone. To everyone that's listening. I love it. I love it. Sarah, thank you so much. I'm going to pop all of your links and ways that people can contact you in the show notes so that they can come and find out more about the amazing work that you do.
Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me on here. I've loved this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you once again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Sarah Elisabeth and gained a new perspective on maybe some ways that you can ensure that your lifestyle and your nutrition is really supporting your ambition and the things that you want to do in the world. Now, just a reminder, we talked about a lot of different resources in that episode. They are all linked in the show notes. So anything that you want to go and check out, you can click through there. I also wanted to remind you that next month is Ask Me Anything August here on the podcast, where I'm opening the floor up to you as the listener. What would you like me to answer? What would you like to know? Maybe you would like to take the opportunity to get some anonymous free coaching around an energy mindset issue that is coming up for you. Maybe you would like to ask me more about something that I do in my own energy mindset practice. This is literally passing the floor open to you and me being an open book. I love being able to create these collaborative episodes. I haven't done one in far too long. So if there is something that you would like to ask, something that you would like to hear about, please contribute, because these episodes in August are literally going to be guided by you. You can send me an email, hello@theambitiousintrovert.com. That's hello@theambitiousintrovert.com. And just pop in the subject line, Ask Me Anything August. And then I'll take those questions. I will create 1 or 2 episodes depending on how many I get in. And don't worry, as I say, it will be anonymous, but I'm really excited for the chance to have a little bit of back and forth and really collaborate on these August summer episodes. So thank you again for listening, and I will see you in a few weeks. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. I hope that you're feeling expanded to what's possible for you, motivated to take action, and inspired about how you can start to own your energy. I share even more tools and resources on my Introverts Only email newsletter. By signing up, you not only get early access to the Ambitious Introvert products and services, but you also get brand new podcast episodes delivered straight to your inbox every Monday, meaning you'll never miss your weekly dose of introvert-friendly inspiration. Sign up now at theambitiousintrovert.com/newsletter or click the link in the show notes. See you next week.